Hamatakiapi, Abetawashte, Shokina Duzahoya, and Makiapi, Chantewashe Yuhachujapi. Good day, all my relations. My name is Jessa Ray Green Thunder, and I am Director of Tribal Nations Initiatives at Native Americans in Philanthropy. On behalf of Native Americans in Philanthropy, I'd like to welcome you to our March member education session. We are very excited to share this important panel discussion centering some of the incredible Indigenous matriarchs who are reclaiming philanthropy. Our team is honored to welcome 3 impactful Native women who are continuously finding ways to uplift and give back to their and our communities. As we celebrate the historic contributions of our women this month, we honor the critical leadership of matriarchs within Native relationship structures. These women have long been traditional knowledge bearers, guiding our future generations and advocating for the needs of their peoples. Particularly through their philanthropic work, these women are reshaping how funders and other supporters engage with Native communities, reinforcing Indigenous values of generosity, respect, responsibility, partnership, and reciprocity. This work becomes increasingly important as the field focuses more on community-led solutions that foster stronger, more sustainable partnership with tribal nationships. Personally, I am really proud to come from a family of strong matriarchs. I'm excited to have you all join this conversation and hope you enjoy hearing the stories and knowledge shared by these remarkable leaders. To get us started today, I'd like to welcome NAP's Education Resource Facilitator, our MES moderator, Shondine Vanderveer.
Shondine Vanderveer. Hello to everyone. Thank you, Desiree. My name is Shondine Vanderveer, and I'm honored to join you guys today as your moderator. I am a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and I'm joining you all here today from traditional Coastal and Esalen lands in the state of California. First and foremost, welcome. We are very excited to have you join us again. If this is your first time, we're excited to introduce you to our member education sessions. These sessions are designed to share topics and issues that affect our communities from the perspectives of those that are most impacted, and to also provide an opportunity for the philanthropic sector to learn from these voices and to take action. So today we'll be hearing from some truly awe-inspiring Indigenous women who will share a bit about their experiences, as well as their visions for creating more impactful and culturally aligned practices within the philanthropic field. Before we dive in, I do want to take another moment to thank Jessaray for welcoming us and for centering our discussion in a good way today. Our team here at Native Americans in Philanthropy is full of just incredible, strong culture bearers, and I'm honored to have her here with us today to share in our appreciation for our matriarchs. As she said, she is the director of our Tribal Nations Initiative, and her work there is essential in building strong and lasting communities. So thank you, Jessaray. As she outlined, today we'll be joined by 3 leading Native women who have worked hard in the philanthropic sector to make lasting impacts. We are particularly excited to have very strong NAP representation today, with one of our organization's co-founders to a longtime collaborator, as well as a graduate from our Native Youth Grantmakers program and a recent staff addition. But we recognize that our panelists' work spans well beyond this organization, again, making deep and lasting impact throughout Indian country. With that said, I'm excited to get started. Lucille, Sadie, and Barbara each have tremendous experience and presence, so I will let them give you a little bit of insight into their work. Y'all, as you're called, please introduce yourself and your affiliations however you feel comfortable. We'll start off with Lucille.
Thank you, Shondine. And what a great way to start this session with these two very amazing young women who are working with and in Native Americans in philanthropy. And I'm truly inspired for the future. It'll be in good hands, as it will be with Sadie when she speaks to us today. I am Lucille Echo Hawk. I am a citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma and have lived here in the greater Denver area for more than 40 years. And this is the traditional homeland of the Arapaho and Ute peoples, as well as at least 48 other indigenous tribes of North America, including my own. And it's been wonderful through the years to learn more about the various tribes that have inhabited this land that we now call Colorado. I've been involved in Indian affairs over my entire professional life, and though I'm formally retired, I'm really not. I remain engaged however I can and to be helpful and supportive of the efforts going forward. And in particular, with today's conversation in the area of Native philanthropy and our values therein, as well as working with mainstream philanthropy and bringing communities together. I was very honored to be a founder, and there were several who were, and some of whom are not with us anymore. But it's great to see the organization thriving. So I will say nothing more, and we will proceed from there.
Thank you, Lucille. I'm going to pass it over to Sadie. If you could introduce yourself and your affiliations.
Thank you, Shondine. Sigale swagwe, kiwil hawi, niunget, swagengata, niwikitaloda, okali, onayota aga, niwadun hunjoda. Hello, everyone. My name is Iwela Hawi. She brings the wind, but some may know me as Sadie Hill Kelly. I'm Turtle Clan, and the people of the Standing Stone is the land earth that I come from. I just graduated last year from Colorado Mesa University with a degree in political science and a minor in sports management. I currently reside on the United Nation Reservation in Wisconsin, and I am just now a new employee of NAP. I am the grant coordinator, and I'm happy to be on board, and thank you for taking the time today, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you, Sadie. We're so excited to have you with us. And then Barbara, if you could also introduce a little bit about yourself.
Okay, good morning. In my area, it's still morning. And I appreciate so much being invited to sit on this panel with a very old and dear friend, Lucille. We've been through a lot together for many years in the past, and it was just great to reconnect. And then to connect with a young lady who's now a part of Native Americans in Philanthropy as a staff. That just made me very happy to continue to be a supporter of this organization. But I am coming to you from my home area on the Hopi Reservation, where I have spent all of my probably last more than 30 years doing my work from the inside out. And my early time period, I know that I have such a long background of doing things that I probably started in the years when many of you were still in elementary school. So that's how far back I give you some information. But I also wanted to make sure that there is recognition as to who I am. And I am from a family who are both, my mother was from the Laguna tribe, my father from Hopi. And so I also then take my mother's clanship, which is Bear Clan. And I'm I've been a long time person of learning, because that's what it takes. If you're going to lead in any community, I felt I needed to learn as much as I could before developing what was necessary. And so, in knowing and learning what I had to in all these years of development, I feel that I've been able to reach out and do better work in the occupations that I held over these years. And I have not just worked on the Hopi Reservation. I first began in Flagstaff, Arizona, after receiving my master's degree. And that was for a young organization called Native Americans for Community Action, who boast having more than 50 years being in operation now. So learning from some of my own elders, and I look at this way so that you understand how I see people when I call them elders. Anyone who's probably a year older than me may be an elder, and anyone who's a year younger than me is a youngster. That's how I see people. We're not always in the same age. We don't have all of the same knowledge that we wish we could have by certain age levels. So for me, it's easier not to think about age. It's easier for me to see people and the skills that they might have that I could ask to help me do something. So I just want to open up with that because my resume or bio is just too long when I look at it, and I really don't like to go by bios. I like to go by meeting the people, learning who they are, and listening to their backgrounds. Ascoli?
Thank you so much, Barbara, for starting us off, recognizing that that's the most important part, for listening and learning. You have to understand who you're speaking to. So I'm glad that we have a little bit of a better understanding of each of yours backgrounds. Thank you for sharing with us. I want to start off this conversation, Matriarchs Reclaiming Philanthropy. The term matriarch is often used to describe Indigenous women, but I'd like to start us off with getting to know a little bit more about what that means to each of you personally. So Lucille, I'll offer this question to you to start us off. What does being a matriarch mean to you?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be even termed a matriarch, and it comes with great responsibility. And I am, I guess, using that term, the matriarch of my own family, the Echohawk family in Colorado. And so I take great interest in particularly the younger people who are coming up and have questions and may need support and whatnot. And also in the broader community here in Denver. I guess I am the panelist who lives and works in an urban environment, and I have for the last 40 some years. And we are very scattered, and we are very rich in diverse tribal representation. And so that's very hard to get one's arms around. And particularly as you think about trying to really live and work within that term matriarch, because we don't even know who all we are here. And so I think that's a huge responsibility and a challenge.
Very fluid, absolutely. You spoke for the younger generations. Sadie, I'm interested, what does a matriarch mean to you?
Yeah, I think throughout my life, I have been very fortunate enough to experience many different matriarchs and influential women around my communities. Not only do I come from the Oneida Nation, but I come from the Kiowa Creek, Comanche, Shoshone, Absentee Shawnee, and Cherokee people. So going to my other communities and experiencing other influential women that took the time out of their day to, teach me about our culture, our traditions, teach me about my language, and, teach me how to power dance, simple as that. And even, I think my most the impactful impact from women that has been, my sewing journey and my passion for sewing and giving back to the community. And, I was first taught by my grandma how to sew, on my dining room table, teaching me how to sew for American Girl dolls, clothing to match my own. And then going throughout my life, past that, growing up, being involved with other sewing communities and, having women fine tuning my skills, helping me, and, getting the gift of, a sewing machine, simple as that can, it really launched my sewing passion and giving back to those that gave to me. I was gifted skirts and regalia, and now it's my turn to give that back to those younger women below me and that are younger than me. And all around my communities, it's been not a certain age, I would say, of women that have influenced me. It's been all ages, younger than me, my friends, influential women around, simple as my friend teaching me my social dance songs on my way from college. Like her time that she took away and giving back to me, really showed the impactfulness that women of all ages can have on each other. And that's what it means to me for a matriarch.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sadie. Barbara, what's your perspective on the term matriarch?
When I was thinking about that, I first had to turn the terminology of matriarch, which is the dictionary terminology, into something that was closer to home, that made sense to me, so that I could try to give you my perspective on it. And how I term that is looking at an elder woman as the term that I would prefer to use. And that is someone who is usually the head of the family or clan in our community, is a willing protector, someone who nurtures, and someone who has to become a leader of her own family and community. Those are usually items ingrained in us as we learn who we are and what the culture we live in, and how we practice passing on some of that information that we have learned. And so I like Sadie's vision also of talking about the younger ones that she received some of her education from, because there are many of us who may not be in the elder stages that have learned something, as long as they are willing to teach others about it. I look at them as people who have earned respect and gained the wisdom to enrich others. That's how I see a matriarch.
Beautiful. I thank you for sharing your perspective, Barbara. It means something different to each of us, but I've really liked how each of your definitions of the term, they all are, they come from your family, your personal experiences. They definitely shape your understanding of what it means. And even across all of these different communities that we're representing today, there are a lot of similarities. So thank you each for sharing those. Recognizing that we are coming from many different Native communities, could you share a little bit of your journey into the philanthropic sector? What inspired you to get involved? And we've touched on this a little bit before, but I'm really interested in seeing how your journey has evolved over time, balancing an Indigenous identity in sometimes a Western philanthropic field. Sadie, I know it's a big question, but I'll pass it off to you to get the conversation started.
So I think my journey really started when I was in the first cohort of Native Youth Grant Makers, a part of Native Americans in Philanthropy. It was in 2022 when I joined, and that was really when I got my foot in the door and I understood what philanthropy was from a non-Native, standpoint of philanthropy. We've always been doing philanthropy, but with giving back in certain ways to our communities, giving time, giving our knowledge, storytelling to, people of all ages. And I think the Native Youth Grantmakers really helped me in our leadership skills, our advocacy skills, and understanding the philanthropic sector. It was a cohort of 7 to 8 women, and we were very fortunate enough to create a long-standing friendship from that point on. But I think also it helped to look back at the first question as well, understanding that philanthropy is always in Native communities. With individual philanthropy, our communities probably would not exist. Without giving back to our own people and our own communities, we have in different ways we wouldn't be here, and that's how we stay strong to each other, and that's how we support each other, because we are a community of people, and that's how we take care of each other and we balance our environment. I always think it's who we are as Native people, giving back, as a community, go back to the basics of being there for your own people and, going toward the common goal of enriching your community and making it better than what it was.
Thank you. Barbara, I'll offer it to you if you could tell us a little bit about what got you involved and how it's evolved over time.
Thank you. I had to think way back to come up with what it was that started me in this particular area. And it took me back to my first employment with Native Americans in Philanthropy in Flagstaff. I was able to recognize how people were referred to in our community of Flagstaff in the early 80s. And the term that I kept hearing working from that organization, unfortunately, was the drunken Indian. That's what I grew up with. And I express this better these days because I also recognize that I come from a family of substance abuse. And that term never came about in my life. And so when I was employed there and I learned that this was a derogatory phrase that was going around, but I knew it wasn't real in my mind. And so what I did when I didn't know how to be in philanthropy on the outside, I took my the words and taught myself, how do I turn this around in this community? And what I decided was, having come from great values that my parents and grandparents taught me on how to be a positive person, how do I help others take care of one another? I went out to the community and I started an education event with many organizations of people I met. And the education was there to help reduce the way they saw us in a negative mode. And it proved okay for me, but it was like sometimes and philanthropy for me doesn't just include going after the funding that might be needed. Philanthropy includes volunteers, and you have to bring volunteers around to me first before they are able to help you also find people who believe in your vision, to want to help you move people into different thoughts and better lives. And so that I believe took me into not being fearful, because in the beginning, coming from my life, because I was taught to be very strong and not have to ask for anything, but I had to work for it to receive it. And being strong, I looked at the term to go out and ask for something as not being strong. I looked at the term as being a beggar. And so I had to learn how to turn that message around in my own mind to know that I am out there talking to people about the goodness that we have and the goodness that we can help people become if we gave a little bit of help. And by turning my own thoughts to the positiveness that I needed to be able to enjoin other people to work with me, help me get into the beginnings of finding first the volunteers that we needed and then the donors. And I lived in a city mode where I had to deal with city people and county people and university people. So those are the minds that I had to spend my time trying to make changes in my early years. And once I made the change in myself of how I saw philanthropy, just based on the values that I was provided and practiced up to that point, I feel very strong that my values carry me from there forward. And I don't fear talking and giving stories about who we are and how people can partner with us to make life better for anyone who might be in a bad situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Lucille, do you have any similar experiences? I mean, you and Barbara have worked together for quite some time, but I'm interested to hear what got you involved in the philanthropic sector.
Well, I believe the Creator plays a strong role in giving us the guidance we need to do what we do with community. When I moved to Denver in 1981, I'd been running around the country telling Native people how to do things I'd never done myself. And I promised when I moved here that I would put down roots and get involved in the community. And I worked for a national Native nonprofit. And so they gave me lots of flexibility to, quote, engage in community. And over time, I saw that engagement as being an opportunity to build bridges between my work in the Native community here in Greater Denver with the rest of the community, many or some of whom were connected with private philanthropy, which I had really never thought much about. And in so doing, I was invited to become one of the early trustees in the Colorado Women's Foundation in its formative years. And that was an eye-opening experience. Plus, being a part of the 1986 class of Leadership Denver really gave me many more opportunities to make connections and build those needed bridges and really see the world much in a much different lens than I previously had, and the opportunities to bring Native community better together with the broader community in terms of the connections, the opportunities to educate on both sides, and to build broader, more meaningful community overall. And so it was during that time that there was this beginning groundswell for Native people not really truly being at all recipients of broader philanthropic dollars across the country. And so things just kind of all lined up. And I knew Louis Delgado, the principal founder of Native Americans in Philanthropy, through his work as a community development consultant out of Chicago, and he was connected with the private foundation there, a community foundation, and he came to Denver, and I was the board chair of the Denver Indian Center at the time, and it was just, so many connections and so many, light bulbs turned on about opportunity as well as challenges ahead. So it was quite an exciting time, but it it just, I think, is so important because I saw mainstream philanthropy as kind of a scary thing, but it really wasn't. And then later, I actually worked for a private foundation for 12 years, the Casey Family Programs, which is an operating foundation out of Seattle. But I was blessed to do work with Native communities with that foundation. And so that was part of the learning too, is being a staff person of a private foundation, as well as working in the nonprofit sector as a volunteer to bring people together and educate one another and become good listeners on both sides of the table.
Thank you, Lucille. It's incredible to hear each of you speak about your experiences. I mean, obviously, Lucille and Barbara have a couple of generations on Sadie, but hearing all of the different initiatives that each of you have been involved in is truly, it's inspiring. I'm interested in, as you've, filtered through all of these different positions or roles, whether in your communities or in your careers, can you speak to some unique strengths that you've seen Indigenous women bring to leadership positions? And I'm going to offer that to Barbara first, but I really do want to see if there are any similarities that you can find between yourselves. So if you feel you agree with something that Barbara says, please feel free to jump in or add on. Barbara, could you speak to those unique strengths?
With staff, I think what popped out to me when I did my interviewing was how, again, it brought back the values that I had learned and who brought forth some of those kinds of values. I had to be able to find people that I could work with. And something that kept popping up was, how did these people that I was listening to look at the people they were going to be serving? And many times it was the female who came forth with this caring attitude, because many of them were mothers, many of them were caretakers of elders. And so it's just that caring attitude and how you speak to someone is what helped me see the better in some of these women who sometimes just did not even think they had something to offer. And it took at times asking them, what do you think about this? How would you look at this situation if it came across to you? And most of it was, how do you deal with people? How do you earn some kind of good relationship with another person? How do you give respect? And a lot of them could just talk about themselves, and between how they took care of their family, to the ceremonies that they might be responsible for, it's like you could see and point out who had leadership qualities early on. I mean, you don't become the leader of your own family if you don't have or gain some of those leadership qualities, even though you don't know you're doing it. And again, I say, if you have yourself have been ingrained in the values that were taught to you for many years, it's there. I didn't know the values were within me. I just practiced them because that's what I was taught. And it wasn't until I came to work on Hopi and started taking a look at the organization the Hopi leadership organization that I became the executive director of. But I was creating a leadership program, and I was trying to also teach my own staff about some of the thinking that I had, but I didn't really know how to explain all the values that I felt I had. And so I brought in a Hopi gentleman who had developed a list of values for his place of employment before I brought him in. And that was at the Hopi tribe. But he had developed a fantastic list for someone like myself who is not a speaker of either of my languages due to my parents not wanting to have us be put in that mode. And that was the time, the early times. So he came in, and as he was sharing those values with us, list by list, and giving examples as he went down the list, I was sitting there and in my mind was saying, I've done this, I've done this. And as the list kept going on, my confidence and the pride in who I was getting stronger. And so I was finding I was lifting myself up by what I was learning that I had been practicing. And so I've lost a little bit of my train of thought. So I think I'll just share that much with you and pick up and with the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. It's incredibly self-affirming. I can't imagine how that must have felt to read through and see so much of yourself in those Hopi values. Sadie, Lucille, I'll open it to the two of you if you'd like to add any other unique strengths of Indigenous women that you've come across in your time.
I will just add that thank you, Barbara, because I absolutely agree with everything you've said. And I would just add that Native women have always been leaders. We just were quiet about it. And I think, at least in the tribal cultures that I'm familiar with, that's always been the case. And we always, and particularly in my tribe, we sit behind our men, always. We're never in front of them. We're always behind them. But they pay attention to our views and echo them in whatever the discussion is. And now in the last 20, 30 years, Native women have really, in a real way, and it's almost a Western way, really come into their own and being more visible as leaders. But it's always been there. And it's just great to see, particularly among young women, really the blossoming of that leadership.
Passing off to our young woman on the panel, Sadie, any other Indigenous strengths that you've seen with fellow female leaders?
I appreciate what Barbara and Lucille said. I agree with them as well, but kind of what stuck out to me, that what they stated was about the values and how like that has been, you didn't realize that you had them inside you already and that you were practicing them all, throughout your whole life. And I think that is what I've seen throughout women in my upbringing, that they practice the values and they do it and they bring it everywhere in their life, even though they don't, physically show it. It's always in your mindset when you make decisions. It's always in, decisions about your people and your community. And I think what I've seen most and what I, kind of sticks out to me is that they learn to balance, the causes that are important to them and important to their community. While also what Lucille said, it's kind of a Western way, coming up now, all the young ones and the women leaders are now, being there and having a voice that's louder than what it was before and stronger. And I think that's what really stuck out to me when I was thinking about this question, and also hearing from Lucille and Barbara. Like, I think we all kind of thinking of the same thing, and it's great to see and hear, all the women that are coming up now and the young youth that are emerging leaders. And it's just great to see that they all have unique strengths to their own communities as well.
Thank you, Sadie. I'm going to keep reiterating over and over again how incredible it is, the balance. You know, part of the unique format that MESs bring is that we can uplift so many different of our tribal communities, unique as they are, and share in a lot of the overlapping similarities that we find along the way. I'm going to emphasize that. And Sadie, I'm going to pass this to you to start us off. If you can share some best practices that you found in your own community to identify and address needs, because every community has them, and philanthropy is truly a tool that many Indigenous people use to address those. So if you could share a little bit about what you found to solve those.
In my community, with Oneida, you know, kind of going back on this question too, like we are a matriarchal society, and like we value the women, and they are, you know, behind the scenes, they're making the decisions. They give, you know, clan mothers give names, they elect and leaders in our traditional longhouses, and they are the people that, you know, hold the power. Although they might not always say it, they are there and they see and hear things, and they are always watching in our community. And, you know, they have this responsibility to the Oneida Nation and, you know, other Haudenosaunee tribes as well. And kind of the best practices I've seen, you know, growing up is reaching straight to the community, going straight to them, understanding their problems, talking to them. You know, we are the same people, we come from the same background, and, you know, having lived experiences in my community, you know, with my time this past summer, I've been trying to develop a youth summer program, and, you know, going straight to the community and putting out surveys, talking to the youth, talking to high schoolers. You know, the reservation is very checkerboarded with Green Bay, the city right next to us. So their school districts are very all around. Students, kids go to anywhere throughout the town. And so it's very spread out. And, you know, living through that, going to public school throughout my life, and knowing that, you know, I needed that network of other Oneida youth. And with programs that I was growing up with, that was available, but, you know, bringing those back and making sure that we build, bridge that gap between the kids and the youth so that they are connected and they know people throughout their community. So when they go off the reservation or they go into the job force or college, they are still connected no matter what, and they always have a place to come back here.
Thank you, Sadie. Lucille, I'll pass it to you. Can you share a little bit about the best practices you found for identifying and addressing the needs of your community?
Well, the bedrock principle is be a good listener. And, you know, I think oftentimes we come to the table, you know, with experience oftentimes, and we think we know, but we need to zip our lip and figure out ways to engender and have people feel comfortable to share. And so I think the art of being a good listener is critical. It certainly is here with the very rich and diverse, quote, community in Denver. And in my work in child welfare in the last 30 some years, there is a training that I really encourage people to take advantage of, and it's called motivational interviewing. And it teaches how to ask questions that make and help people to be more comfortable in sharing. And it's a lot about trust building. And of course, that's very important. If you want people to share with you and talk with you, they have to trust you. And so, you know, being a good listener and being able to bring about a trusting environment so people can share, you know, and it's shared in problem solving. I mean, as we think about, particularly as a fundraiser, you know, what goes into grant proposals is all about solving problems. And but you've got to be a good listener to hear A, what the problems are, and B, ideas on how to solve them.
That training sounds incredible. If you could share that with some more of our team, that would be a beautiful resource. Barbara, I'll pass it to you if you would like to go over any best practices that you found along your journey in the philanthropic field.
What I found was making sure first that I understood the community I was working with. So Lucille made a big uh, impact there about listening, and I see that as very important. Listening to learn is how I see it. And when I came to Hopi, I didn't have all the cultural training behind me because I lived off the reservation. And I had to learn from my relatives uh, about some of the what some of the values were in its meaning.
I think we may have lost Barbara for just a moment, but I am very excited to hear a little bit more about the different ways that she's found in her specific community to address needs. I am going to shift it a little bit to go a little bit more into integrating the cultural and traditional values that each of our communities have imbued us with throughout, growing up and into adulthood. Sadie, I'm gonna give it to you. With your unique identity, how do you go about integrating cultural or traditional elements into your leadership or your work as a whole?
I really think it goes back to the first question as well, what a matriarch means to me, how they install the values and that I carry in every day. And being an Indigenous woman, you have those no matter where you go in the workplace, college, in your life. And I think it's really important to know and respect your environment that you're in and your community that you come from. And I guess there's really not one way to really integrate, cultural traditional elements. It's all different. Everyone comes from a different community around Indian country. And I think how people use their values that they have, that they were taught, really is how they should implement it into their leadership roles. There's not one rule like, how the Western, view of things is set and done. Indigenous people, we are very fluid in the way that we do stuff and the way that we learn and the way that we teach. And I think that's how I bring cultural and traditional values into my work, my values, growing up being involved in leadership aspects and, teachings and being around strong women all throughout my life. I've been taught, way when I was younger, I remember this going to a conference with my mother, and it was from American Indians for Opportunity, and hearing the kind of background and information that they have in their organization, responsibility, the 4 R's, they call it responsibility, relationship, distribution, and reciprocity, giving back to the people that gave to you. I've been taught that since I was a little kid, and now, Native Youth Grant Makers, we implemented some of the aspects and we learn from each other. And it's great to see that all these Native youth are getting involved in their communities and involved in different parts of the country in these leadership opportunities. But I think it's knowing the resources that come from your community and the knowledge and the skills given to you should be passed on, not just to keep, you want to keep passing them on to generations to come. And I think using the values that you're taught in your leadership skills not only makes you a better person, but it helps uplift your community as well. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to help give back. And, coming from a reservation and then moving off, going to college and coming back now, it's my turn to be that person that gives back. It's time, to teach those young women as well that, we have a role and responsibility for our people.
Thank you, Sadie. I appreciate you sharing that. While we're waiting for Barbara to come back on, as I'm sure we all know, a strong internet connection is a fickle thing. But I am going to actually grab a question from our live chat to direct to you, Lucille. I'm going to offer this from Monica Villarreal. They have asked, have any of you had to deal with people challenging your leadership and decision making, especially when it comes to funding and how to spend the funding? I like how this is geared specifically towards the philanthropic sector. And if you have and feel comfortable sharing any ways that you've handled those challenges.
Well, thank you for the question. The way I, quote, cut my teeth in the Native nonprofit community here in Denver was agreeing to serve as serve an unexpired term on what was then called Denver Native Americans United. And I went to my first board meeting with 2 other new volunteers whom I didn't know. And the whole board, except one, got up and resigned. And the remaining folks looked at me and said, well, you just moved here from Washington, D.C., so you should chair this board. I said, I've never served on a nonprofit board, but, what do? You say, okay, as long as we all work together and we'll get this done. And shortly thereafter, the organization was hit with the IRS leveraging bank accounts and funding stopped and whatnot. I mean, it was quite you talk about baptism under fire. But it was about, trying to keep my head straight, even though I didn't know any of these people because I was new, about keeping my eye on the bouncing ball, so to speak. And that is, it's important to maintain this organization because it serves all of Denver in its Native community. And funding is so critical that we've got to get through this and in the most positive way possible and look to the future. And hopefully it's a bright one in terms of fundraising. But a lot of it is how organizations conduct themselves in being accountable for funds received and moving the agendas of the organization forward. And it was a tumultuous time here in the Denver community, and I learned a lot in the process. And I don't wish that on anybody to have to learn that way, but it was a very valuable learning experience, and it served the organization well because it still has its primary funding is still federal, and those were the issues of the day. But we worked through them and got past it, and we had to form a new corporation that is now the Denver Indian Center, Inc., and in a sense start over. But those relationships are so important. And I hope I've answered the question because I don't see it at the bottom of the screen anymore. But it's, it's all about accountability and being honest and forthright in the process. If you've got some messaging to make, do it, but do it respectfully because, you're building a relationship with the funder, be it federal or be it private or state or whatever. So did that answer the question?
I believe so. I think they were specifically looking for, what advice to fall back on when placed in difficult situations, and I think you answered that beautifully. I would like to open it up a little bit more broad, especially since you both have such incredible experience working within Indigenous communities, within philanthropy as a whole. Do you have any advice or encouragement for Native youth or for new people as they delve into these communities, as they start their journeys into more leadership roles? Do you have any advice for them specifically? Sadie, Lucille, I open it to either of you.
I can go first. Although my leadership journey has been, not very long, and it's still going to this day. You know, what I've always been taught is always continue learning, always taking everything that you can. Your life journey is a long life learning journey as well. Although you may have graduated from school or anything, you're always going to be learning from your people, your community, from different communities as well. And I think that's what I like to tell my fellow youth people, and to really know that you're not going to please everyone in different aspects of life, but if you stay true to your values and how you brought up and your the way the issues and problems that you want to solve, you'll be just fine. Stay true to yourself, and it's okay, to take a step back from your community and go get experience elsewhere. Your community and reservation will always be there and support you and always welcome you back to help give back to them as well. And as many women have taught me throughout my life, always be true to who you are and never let anyone doubt you. You are a strong Indigenous woman, and that's how you've been brought up, and that the ancestors behind you, the people that you don't even know their names, their DNA is in you, and you will carry their strength, for yourself and for the future.
Thank you, Sadie. That may have helped even myself. That was beautifully worded. Lucille, do you have any other advice you'd like to give?
I agree with everything that Sadie shared. It's very well said. I think it's, to the extent you can encourage youth to be involved in communities sooner rather than later, and always be a good listener and learning as you go, because, as Sadie said, that's a lifelong learning journey. I think the Native nonprofit sector has grown immeasurably in my lifetime, and that's wonderful to see, because I think it's a lot of opportunity for young people to really step in and step up and really build the future, particularly for Native communities who don't reside on tribal lands. But it's great to see the nonprofit sector on tribal lands as well, reaching out to youth to get involved.
Absolutely. I can't imagine seeing the progression of the field itself throughout all of these years. I mean, it's changed so much in the very short time that I've been involved. But based on that history that you have, what do you envision for the future of Indigenous philanthropy in general? And I know that's a very broad and difficult ask of you both, but it's so important to put in what is our goal into words. So if you could describe what you see and really what we can do today to help that vision become a reality. Lucille, I'm going to hand it right back to you.
Wow. Well, I see Indigenous, your term, I don't use the term Indigenous, Native philanthropy overall, both the grant seekers and the grant makers, because it is a nonprofit community. They're all nonprofits, be they in Indian country, except for tribes, of course, be they on tribal lands or off tribal lands. But what I've seen through the years is growing, certainly, respect for across the line, so to speak, between grant maker and grant seeker in Indian country, and growing respect, and the numbers still, the percentages could be much larger than they are, but it is growing and can grow even more, particularly as more Native people become involved in philanthropy, either as grant seekers and or as grant makers. Tribes are stepping up. I'm very pleased to see that Native Americans in Philanthropy is really reaching out to tribes who do a lot of philanthropy to kind of bring them into the fold, because that wasn't always the case. And I think that's a very rich area and a lot of opportunity there. going forward, particularly in these crazy times. But I have lots of faith and confidence in the future that it's just going to grow more and be better for communities wherever they're located.
Thank you, Lucille. I do want to offer this question to Sadie as well, and hopefully Barbara. I'd like to welcome her into the conversation if her internet is up and working. It seems like the entire thing went down, so we appreciate everybody being flexible. As you settle in, Barbara, just to reiterate, we're really looking at what each of you envision for the future of Native philanthropy. And really what our audience listening can do to help make that a reality. As she settles in, Sadie, if you could take on that question.
Yeah, I see, Native philanthropy in my view, it's really about your service to others and, also what Lucille said, respect, guided by respect by your community and giving back. I also think for that to become a reality, we have to use our traditional ways and teachings to be uplifted more now than ever, because that is how we survived. Now with modern and non-Native philanthropy has really helped us, do things in a different way, in a different light, help support some other modern issues. But I also think it's a huge thing of people need to give back to their community now more than ever. And I think with social media, that's a whole nother tool of how to stay connected, how to give back. Simple as, Facebook Live or Instagram Live, connecting to your tribe when they do a live or when they go live at a powwow, how to give back and how to stay connected like that. It's I see it now coming more than ever. Social media is a huge impact on especially urban areas and connecting a lot of reservations around the country with the work that they do. But I think to really help that become a reality is working together with your community and understanding that there need to be honest conversations, to have to deal with, the difficult issues in each community and how to face that and how to really work as a community to face the problems that you bring your values with you. So bringing your values will really help change in many ways Indigenous people and how they operate as well.
Thank you for sharing, Sadie. Unfortunately, it does seem that Barbara's internet is going in and out, so we won't be able to hear her advice for the future just quite yet. I'm holding out hope that she'll be back in a moment. I'd like to offer another question from our live Q&A. This one is again very specific to the world of philanthropy in general. Phoebe Zinman asks, curious if the speakers have any advice about how to share knowledge with non-Native funders from the perspective of Native-led nonprofits. How can we share knowledge with these funders who maybe don't see a connection between wealth and responsibility? So sort of bridging the gap, between Indigenous-led nonprofits and then the wider pool of philanthropy. Do either of you have any advice that you would like to share on this?
Well, I'm very blessed to live in a state where the philanthropic partners here, for the most part, pay attention and reach out to Native organizations and tribes that they fund. And it's more of a partnered relationship, and that there's learning on both sides. And I don't know how to, make that happen in other parts of the country, but I think there's a lot of that, or some of that, underway. And because I think there are more Native folks involved in mainstream philanthropy who either are trustees or staff, and certainly the current robustness of Native Americans in philanthropy itself to provide some of that advice and counsel. But it takes all of us, and sometimes it's working harder than we want to make it happen. But I think for the most part, at least the folks that I've worked with in mainstream philanthropy are open to it. Oftentimes they just don't know how to acquire it. And so we need to, be proactive in utilizing, the various mechanisms and individuals at our disposal who can bring some of those relationships about, because there are many more Native people who serve as trustees of foundations than there were when I first started. And I'm not sure how we fully utilize those individuals, certainly within their own grant-making operations, but also staff across foundations. And I haven't seen any recent numbers, but it's increased, but it needs to increase even more on both the trustee side as well as the staff, and also grantees need to take better advantage of the relationships that they're building as recipients of the largesse of mainstream philanthropy to offer, step up, solicit invitations, and we don't tend to be that proactive as Native people. We wait to be asked, and more and more. And the use of social media. I don't use social media, so I look to people like Sadie to really be most helpful in that endeavor, because a lot of these folks are on social media, and it's a powerful tool. And how do we really better utilize that resource as well?
Thank you, Lucille. And Sadie, if you don't necessarily want to, overstate what Lucille has said, if you could share some advice for bridging the gap, between these connections that are sorely needed.
Yeah, I think it's also what Lucille said about respect and relationships. I see it as here in Oneida, the reservation, and especially going to public school, you have to realize, people don't know about Indigenous people around the country or even the state. And, finding that fine line between educating them when they should be the ones to educate themselves about current issues and about current problems, especially now with social media and information about Indigenous communities are all around the country, and it's all on social media. And it's in modern day that the problems that we've been through as Indigenous people, it's not so much hidden anymore. And these funders and these organizations, have an obligation to some sort to, reach out and expand their funding to these Native nonprofits or tribes or anything else, because without them reaching out, like Lucille said, sometimes we do kind of wait to be asked because we've been so kind of depleted of educating all these people around the country. It's kind of like we need to refill our cup in a certain way, in a certain type, and it's not our issue to educate them all the time, because in high school I used to say, you have Google, you can research it. I'm not your Google. And I think there's a fine line to find that between Native orgs and nonprofit philanthropy organizations as well. And I think we're still trying to figure that out. NAP does a great job already, bridging the gap. And I think in the coming years will be even better.
Thank you. And I do want to offer some words from our third panelist, Barbara Poley. Her entire power on Hopi Reservation, it seems, has gone out. So she is not able to join us again, but she sends her apologies and does want to reiterate that this happens quite often on many reservations. I remember the time, growing up on Navajo, it was incredibly frustrating. But she, again, sends her apologies. I would like to offer this next question to both Lucille and Sadie, again, who have spent an incredible amount of time acknowledging all of these broad questions that I've been giving you over the course of this panel. I'd like to give the closing word here. As you look forward, we really want this to be a mutual capacity building platform for you both. So what are you excited to see develop? You know, whether that's within your own career or something within the field of philanthropy that you're looking forward to. I offer this time for you to share that with our audience here today. I'll start with Sadie.
I think I'm just excited now coming back from college and moving back to my reservation, seeing how philanthropy in my community can impact us in so many different ways. Bridging different communities and organizations together here in Green Bay with the tribe as well. And then also, giving back to my own community by helping the youth, create a summer summit, hopefully launching this summer. We're working on that right now and giving back to them because they're the next generation of leaders, and to uplift them is what my passion is for. And I was provided opportunities when I was younger, and it's now time to give them those opportunities because we need the leaders. We just need them to be taught and get all the experience that they can to help their people as well. And I also think allowing Indian country as a whole to understand what philanthropy is, and NAP does a great job with that, and bringing to light all the issues that different communities have. And I see a lot of great things happening in the future with young leaders that I've known around Indian country, with the leadership opportunities I was presented, and with my connections with Native youth grant makers. Like, we are all around the country doing our own work in our community that are helping each other. And, we're all still checking in with each other, looking for this one goal of helping our communities. And I really see philanthropy as a whole in the next coming years changing and evolving to really help our communities.
Thank you, Sadie. Lucille, if you'd like to take a moment to share what you're excited about as well.
Well, I'm excited about Sadie and you and all the other younger people that are involved in this field, and the roles that you're playing, because they're critically important, and hearing the theme that you're also mindful of mentoring and encouraging those that are coming behind you, because that's absolutely critical as well. That we keep up the momentum and increase it and expand it however we can. There are, to one of your points, Sadie, about how people get tired of having to do what LaDonna Harris used to call, and maybe she still does, Indians 101. So often, we all still need to do that because it's an opportunity in many ways. I've always seen it, even though it gets a little tedious at times. But, my experiences in recent years, there's less need to do that because people are Googling and using other mechanisms to increase their own learning and respect for tribal cultures around the country. And that's very encouraging as well. That there's a curiosity. This morning on the CBS, I think it was, one of their commentators on CBS This Morning, or whatever it's called, was remarking on the U.S. Department of Defense taking off of its website any reference to Native peoples and other peoples as well. But he particularly called out, the respect for Native veterans, and particularly he mentioned Ira Hayes and the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima, Okinawa in World War II. And I was very touched by that, because often mainstream media doesn't single out Native people, and I thought, that's progress. Did it go as far as it could have? Probably not, but I was impressed with that, because he went on for 2 or 3 minutes about it, and then he talked about other things that were taken away from the U.S. Department of Defense's website. But mostly, despite all the craziness going on in our country right now, I'm inspired and really encouraged by the future, particularly young people. And Sadie mentioned the network of the Native young grant makers and the however many cohorts there have been of that. I hope Native Americans in Philanthropy grows that, because I think it's critical. And in my advisory role with Native Voices Rising, we include Native young Native grant makers, and I mean they have become a very important piece of the backbone of what we're able to do with Native Voices Rising and distributing funds to tribal America, and so much more can come of that. So I'm very well. I tend to be an optimist anyway, but I'm very optimistic about the future because it's in good hands. And they're not forgetting elders, and that's good too.
It's all about balance. Absolutely, Lucille. Thank you. And honestly, we need more optimists in this world. I think they keep us going. The hope is what keeps us going. So I appreciate you both sharing your visions of the future. I want to take a moment. I hope I'm not overstepping, but through all of our planning of this panel, Ms. Barbara Poley did share some of what she was excited about for what's upcoming for her in particular. And I do want to take a moment to share that on her behalf, since she isn't able to say it here on this platform with us. She has been grateful enough to work with 8 other elders from various different tribal nations throughout the US on a book that is called Worlds Within Us. It was published in collaboration with, I believe, the Spirit Aligned Leadership Program that she was a part of. And it focuses on essentially what we've shared here today, of sharing wisdom from incredible matriarchs from various communities, their work and their experiences. So if you are interested in hearing more in depth, perhaps in a different format, as I said, it is a book, it is available, and she would be happy to share all of her experiences and her fellow elders' experiences. I'd like to just take a moment. Thank you, Lucille. Thank you, Sadie, so much for taking the time to share such insightful and meaningful responses today. As we wrap up this panel, I want to express my gratitude for again, all of your time and the wisdom that you shared on all these topics that deeply impact our communities. Each of your perspectives truly remind us of the importance of all of these different attributes, cultural preservation, of leadership and philanthropy, especially as we look to the future. And to our audience, I really want to say thank you for being a part of this conversation. It's truly a testament that we can continue to work together to create positive change, and as Lucille and Sadie said, to support the next generation of Indigenous leaders. So thank you. I would also like to say a big thank you to specifically our members in the audience. Your support in our ongoing programming allows us to continue to bring voices like these to you in these member education sessions. So thank you. As a reminder, this session was open to the public as a highlight of our member benefits. So Native Americans in Philanthropy membership is open to all our Indigenous relatives and non-Indigenous allies. So if you're not a NAP member yet and you want to learn more, if you want to be engaged with more of these conversations throughout Indian country, or if you would like to collaborate, please visit our website. It is nativephilanthropy.org. You can also email our staff, Reina Davia at rday@nativephilanthropy.org. We welcome any questions or feedback that you would like to give to us. Lastly, you should be receiving an email with a link to a very short survey. We would be greatly appreciative if you could take a few moments to share your feedback. It's a critical piece of information that we cherish deeply as the voices of our audience. And we'd love to hear what you'd like these sessions to look like in the future. It should take maybe about 5 to 6 minutes to complete, but it does provide invaluable feedback for our team and for our planning, and to ensure that we're offering the resources that you're most interested in seeing. As we look forward, we do also want to take a moment to offer all of our relatives strength and peace. As we have discussed throughout this panel, there are a lot of obstacles, a lot of challenges, but the importance of our communities cannot be overstated. It's one of our most valuable resources. So the importance of building and sustaining these spaces of shared learning and mutual aid can't be overstated. I mean, it's essential in this time. So please take time to care for your needs, for your elders and your kin, and all of those around you in a good way. We're very grateful for our network here, and we'll continue to provide needed resources and highlight the work being done throughout Indian country. We're excited to share more of these sessions throughout 2025, so please make sure to join us back here on YouTube, on LinkedIn, all of our social medias. Our next MES will be in May. We'll be delving into the critical role of tribal tourism and the role that it plays in the economic and cultural prosperity of many Native communities, both on Turtle Island and throughout the world. Thank you again so much for joining us, and have a great afternoon.